I am very happy to welcome this very special guest, Professor Mariko Okada, who is now faculty at Oberlin Daigaku, Oberlin University in Tokyo. She received her BA, MA, and Ph.D. from Waseda University. Professor Okada accepted our invitation to be the Toyota visiting professor, and she was here from 2012 to 2013. While she was here, I had the honor and privilege to co-teach a course with her, and that was called Geisha, Art, History, and Politics. In the summer following, she led a course on something like how to read kuzushiji, the grassy form of and writing in historical sources that look more like jumping worms or something that most of us find quite forbidding. So throughout all these months, I found myself in awe of Professor Okada's amazing range and depth of talent, multi-talents. She, I think, is one of the most remarkable scholars I have ever met or known. She's an outstanding historian, artist, anthropologist, performance artist, and curator, and so on. Really very, very talented. And on many occasions, she has contributed to creating exhibitions at our University of Michigan Museum of Art. She returns now and then to help the museum. So while she was here in 2012 to 13 as TVP, she was adding, I watched her doing this, the very last touch to a book manuscript, which would be published under the title Kyōmai Inoue-ryu no Tanjo, the birth of the Inoue School of Japanese Traditional Dance. And that would be published by this very prestigious publisher called SHINGUNKA. The manuscript she was preparing, I presume, must have been absolutely perfect because, for one thing, as soon as it was completed, it was published within a few months, and she brings this copy. I said, how is that possible? And then for another thing, as soon as it was published, she won the prestigious Suntory Prize for Social Sciences and Humanities. This prize is awarded to, this is a website description, to individuals who are rising critics or researchers of considerable originality and future potential, who make special contributions to society and culture, which she does. So this happened in 2014, and then so we got that news, and we are saying, oh, wow, that's great, that's wonderful, etc., etc. And then next thing we know, we hear that she also won Hayashiya Incentive Award in the study of performance history. And then we are also again saying, oh, that's great. And then no sooner than that, we get news that she won yet another award, Kawatake Award from Japanese Society for Theater Research. So all three awards in 1 year. So in what ways is her book so special and deserving of all these awards? As explained by the evaluators of her book basically overturns myths and stereotypes people have held about the traditional Japanese performance art, the so-called Geisha dance, the Inoue School of Japanese Dance performed in Kyoto, Kyoto Geisha houses. She was able to do this research by using bold and unconventional methods of research that led her to deeply historical sources of the Edo period, as well as to the dance floors of the geisha house itself. So she learned to dance, and in that class that I mentioned earlier, she even performed for the students. And she, of course, knows how to put on kimono, unlike most Japanese women today. Yes. Yes. Okay, so Professor Okada has many interesting stories, experience to share with you while she was here for that year. Maybe you can ask her later. But those experiences includes this what I call the tale of mysterious mushroom that popped up in the bathroom, in the bathtub of the house she was renting in the Old West Side. And she took a photo of it, and it was really a mushroom growing out of her bathtub. It's quite something. So that's a welcome sign from Ann Arbor to a guest from Japan. It is indeed our greatest pleasure to welcome back Professor Mariko Okada, who has and continues to contribute to the scholarly community at the University of Michigan and elsewhere in Japan and other places. Please join me in welcoming Professor Mariko Okada. Thank you. I have to talk about the mushroom. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your too kind introduction for me. I'm under very big pressure now. Here's my mic. Thank you. So, let me start. Okay, so the performance can offer its audience a chance to dream. Dreams are often unfeasible and utopian. Some dreams are too magnificent or too cruel to be realized. As long as dreams are just individual imagination, it is not harmful. However, if a group of people dream same dream, it gains power to transform the real society. Occasionally, these dreams become repressive and inhumane, even though they are extremely beautiful. This paper explores how dance performances under wartime control successfully operated to instill nationalism and patriotism into audience and to foster regimes of militarism. So Imperial Japan expanded its territory over Asia and Oceania in the first half of the 20th century. During that time, the Japanese Imperial Army annexed Taiwan and the Korean Peninsula, Korean Empire. They built puppet state of Manchukuo in northern China and put the South Sea Island under mandate. Japan kept terrorizing all of East Asia and the neighboring areas throughout its imperial rule. The Great East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, which was Japan's concept at the time, was an errant policy which required exorbitant budget and strong support from the general public. Arts were utilized by militaristic government to gain understanding, approval, contributions, and advocacy of the public. So dance, too, was exploited to show an idealized scene to generate people's interest and make them dream a common flinty dream. So this paper presents how Japan used the cheerful, open, and naive stimulus of Kyoto's traditional dance performances to disguise its belligerent rhetoric of violence. It is a model example of Japan's use of dance as a tool for indoctrination. Kyoto is an old capital of Japan from 8th to 12th century and 14th to 16th century. Even after the capital was shifted to today's Tokyo in early 17th century, Kyoto has remained important cultural center in Japan. The city of Kyoto has many traditional buildings, arts, events, industries, and lifestyles, which are still attracting tourists from both inside and outside Japan. Among them, Geisha are powerful popular icons of this traditional city. They are female entertainers who serve at the banquet with their artistic skills of dance and music since 18th century. The word geisha literally means art person, and because of their artistic skills, these entertainers can be called geisha. Nowadays, their dance and music are regarded as traditional. Their official outfit are also traditional Japanese robe kimono, and they wear traditional hairstyle wigs. Today's geisha can make people feel like stepping back in 18th century Japan. Their archaism is viewed as attractive and distinguishing. However, Back in 1930s, they did not feature their antique value, but rather progressive outlook. Until then, since their creation, geisha had been fashion leaders and popular icons, similar to later movie actresses or female singers. Their portraits were printed and sold, and in 20th century, their songs were recorded and released. They have been attractive enough to be utilized politically. The Kyoto city government focused on geisha's popularity and organized their public dance performance in order to draw large crowds to Kyoto Exposition for the first time in 1872. Geisha have used to dance at private banquets, festivals, and dance school recitals, but not in public. Kyoto Exposition was one of the modernization efforts of the city and resulted in huge success. The first trial of geisha's public dance, which was named Miyako Odori or capital dance, reached the first place of popular event during the exposition. Following up this success, many geisha quarters, which could be found nationwide, organized their own public dance performances. Newspaper published just 4 months later of the first performance reported that the geisha district about 400 kilometers away organized dance performance in imitation of the Kyoto's performance. In the Kyoto city, there were 8 geisha communities, and more than half of them held public dance performance as a part of exposition. Original dance performance has become an annual event held every spring, which represents the city of Kyoto until today. So it is a certain geisha district called Gion, where this annual public geisha performance has been held. This is the most famous quarter, which has formed the setting of novels and movies. As a dance researcher, I noticed the unique dance school which has exercised strong control in this district. I started conducting research on this all-female Inoue school in 1992. As part of the dance research, I began to study the public dance event of the district. So thanks to the popularity of event, many materials were extant, such as pictures, postcards, official programs, lyrics, photo books, newspaper reports, reviews in magazines, records, and films. Moreover, when I started research, I was able to interview ex-geishas about dance performances in the first half of the 20th century. With the multitude of resources, I was able to argue what the dance on the stage was like. Above all, films had a great impact. Provided valuable films to research, I organized a study group to explore in detail and publish the report on film. This paper is based on the findings of this group study. In the 1930s, Japan was making a dash for colonial power. In September 1931, Japan caused the Manchurian incident and started to invade China. Japan built a puppet regime in 1932 and walked out of the League of Nations and started the Sino-Japanese War of 1937 to 45. These events were caused by Japanese military, which was overconfidently running amok, but at the same time, they were backed by the people's support. Beautiful stories which lifted the spirit for the war were created, circulated, and consumed. Most famous beautiful war story is Nikudan Sanyushi, which was circulated by newspapers, novels, theaters, and films. The state theater movement also occurred in 1930s, and it helped the consolidate state control of the people. The dance performances of geisha in Kyoto sensed this militaristic climate and reflected in their annual event. The theme tended to be nationalistic, through praising Japan's history and culture. An act of 1939 performance is worthy of attention, which entitled NISSHI Shinko, or Friendship between Japan and China. According to notes in official program, the act was divided into two scenes using two types of accompanied music. The first half used AIBA SHINGUNKA, or marching song of beloved horse, and the second half used Daiwa Ondo, or dance song for Great Japan, and Koa Ondo, or dance song for prospering Asian countries. The former marching song is one of the popular war songs, which lyrics and music were chosen from among the public by the Army Ministry, and 6 recording companies released their own record of this song. It described war horses at the front and expressed strongly attached bond between soldiers and horses. Daiwa Ondo depicted sunrise and cherry blossoms in the early morning, congratulated Japan's new territory in continent, and holiness of emperor. Japanese national flag, Hinomaru, was recited in refrains. So let's look into Koa Ondo. It named Chinese popular venues such as the Forbidden Palace and the Great Wall, and the 5-colored flag representing 5 races. In refrain, it is said, brothers, brothers, hand in hand, march April east wind. Brothers and month were in Chinese. Since Japan is located in east to China, the east wind means Japan's influence or power. Month seemed to be written because the performance was held in April 1939. Its lyrics thus depicted the friendship between Chinese and Japanese people. The dance songs were written by famous poets Kitahara Hakushu, who were very active at that time. These songs of this act can be listened with record today. So let's listen to the first verse of this Koa Ondo. This Koa Ondo was composed by Yamada Shotaro, who were rising star shamisen player and were also teaching in Gion district and composing every year's performance music. He wrote cheerful music for this song, so taking in Chinese style tunes with Chinese words, and it also used a Chinese instrument. These Chinese elements were sufficient enough for Japanese audience to conjure images of China in good spirits. However, of course, the real situation in China was anything but happy. The Mariko Bridge incident of 1937 marked the beginning of full-scale war. The Second Sino-Japanese War became fierce, involving non-combatants, ordinary citizens. On the extremely contrary, the dance performance showed the peaceful relationship between two countries. Audience listened to the friendly, sunny Chinese music and favorable lyrics with completely concealed devastating reality. The extant paper documents showed that the performers of this act were all children who did not have their professional name as geisha. In 1930s, girls were sold to the district under the age of 10 and were trained to be geisha. Many girls were belonging to the geisha community. As a part of their training, they learned dance and music. Even before their debut, they already danced in public. Each year, children dancers can be seen in the performance. However, the scenes shot in the 16mm film were rather shocking, even though we knew already that the performers are all children, and it was very short at 35 seconds. So 20 bobbed hairstyle girls were shot. In the first half of the act, they wore kappogi or Japanese-style aprons with sleeves, and tasuki or sash used to hold up tucked kimono sleeves, which are the uniform of Kokubo Fujinkai or Japan's National Defense Women's Association. They danced holding Japanese national flag. Children in the uniform of adult women looked very strange but adorable, and at the same time, they are very much powerful. They created a deep impression. Official program indicated that the organization of the district welcomed the choreographer from outside for the first time in its history, whose name was Shimada Yutaka. He developed the dance of AIBA SHINGUNKA, the first half of the act, for the children dancers. He was a famous choreographer for the children. He founded Jido Buyo Kyokai, or the Association for Children Dance, in 1924. He has already made the exhibit dance for this same song, AIBA SHINGUNKA, and received great praise in Kyoto. And this success could not be missed out for the district, which had sought the way to get performance permission. The stage for the second half was set in the front yard of Taiheiryuan, or Hall of Supreme Harmony, within the Forbidden City in Beijing. On the stage, 10 children dancers in Chinese kipé and 10 children dancers wearing Japanese kimono danced together in a big circle, hand in hand. The choreography of the second half is very simple and criticized by newspaper review that they should be more creative. However, it reminded the audience children's play game called Kagome Kagome, which everyone knows and did in their childhood in Japan. This impression is very strong, and it made audience as if they themselves had a good friendship with Chinese children. Another newspaper review wrote, quote, "It is a very beautiful scene where Chinese children and children of our country cheerfully dance together, holding their own national flag, hand in hand, celebrating our solid foundation of the peace in Asia." End quote. The simple choreography seemed to contribute to the joyful impression of the scene. After all, straightforwardness probably functioned in an effective and efficient manner. Taking innocent children resulted in a strong impression because it is unusual and odd. This firm impact possibly precipitated supporting military regime. The lyrics of dance song were also simple with many refrains. The song is rhythmic and easy to learn. After the performance, the record of this song was released. It is not hard for us to imagine how the audience would start singing on the street after leaving the show. The dream which was brought by the act was, however, obviously a complete fiction. After occupying Nanjing in December 1937, Japan was forced into difficult battle. The reality was horrific, but what the audience wanted to see was not the reality, but a bright, happy event where children from both nations danced together in front of China's representative monument. The performance was no longer a news show, but was it merely a device to project a propaganda of Japan's superiority, glory, and generosity? Or was it a cover for present horrors, just flossy way to disguise reality? Or was it a projection of the audience war-worn desire to see a moment of ideal harmony? Before the motion picture was invented, these performances served the same role as a news program or documentary film today. In Japanese theater history, it is well known that theater conveyed the military situation during the First Sino-Japanese War of 1894 to 1895. There may be no evidence that the creator of Miyako Odori went to the battlefield in China to gather news. But the creator of Kamogawa Odori or Kamo River Dance, a public dance performance of the neighboring Geisha quarter to Gion, visited the Ryukyu Island in 1940 with the intention of producing a performance titled Nanshin Nippon or Japan Moves South. The ability of performance to convey the news still existed in the 1930s. While the battlefield is not a stage and war must be stylized on the stage, the move toward glorification and idealization of war reality on the stage was spurred by the nationalistic and militaristic aims of performance in this period. If performance played the role of news show at one moment in the theatrical history, Miyako Odori in the 1930s can be thought of as the opposite impulse. News shows theoretically convey real events while allowing the audience to maintain some distance. But Miyako Odori performances did not convey the actual situation, but sought to conceal reality with fiction. The impulse to communicate information and the impulse to hide it through reinvention are different. Instead of just hiding information, Miyako Odori performances sought to provide audiences with alternative images that coincided with their desires. In 1930s, Miyako Odori changed focus. No longer did it focus on reality, but instead showed the audience a fictional dream. Performance has always helped the people escape from their burdens, but the dream shown by Miyako Odori was more than an escape. It is similar to collective memory, which creates national identity. The friendly relation with China is, needless to say, not a memory, because it did not happen and nobody remembered. Using an analogy of collective memory, it can be said as a collective ideal or collective dream. These ideals were cleverly constructed to produce this enthusiastic acceptance by audience and serve in the same way of collective memory to create national identity. As mentioned above, firstly, the performance worked sensationally through media mix, such as audio record, programs, postcards, magazines, newspapers, and even news films. Those who did not go to the theater also get inspired by newspaper reports, magazine reviews, posters in the street, and even songs that people sang. Secondly, the performance had a particular affinity for charity. The organizers fundraised and make donations to the army. They often invite families of soldiers, disabled soldiers, and bereaved families. These special hospitalities are reported in the newspapers. It is probably a tool to promote their performance. These kinds of charities were investment of practical use and of getting more customers. Thirdly, the structure of the theater building also worked effectively. In order to explore the context why the Geisha's dance performance has acquired such strong power to instill a fictional ideal to the audience, firstly, the original intention of the performance should be reflected. From the beginning, Geisha's performance was a popular event. They originated to get more customers to the exposition. In other words, they have been originally political event which was imbued with governmental purpose. It was natural to be utilized its politics and popularities. Secondly, social inequalities should be examined. Performers, including Geisha and also Japanese traditional theater actors, were strongly believed to be a profession of discriminated class since pre-modern times. The belief of belonging to low class also functioned powerfully to trumpet national policy. They aspired to be accepted as kokumin, or the people. Perhaps this is why they were extremely sensitive to authorities. On the other hand, the authorities were also seeking opportunity to use performances to help control people because entertainers were so popular and influential. The government's interest coincided with entertainers. There was no reason that authorities and performers utilized each other. In addition to this, thirdly, Geisha's appearance is also necessary to be discussed. In the example of the 1939 performance, the dancers were children. Both of these children dancers and Geisha are young women. As well as children dancers, Geisha looked innocent and non-political, which can be favorable characteristic to lower defense of audiences. At the time, women did not have right to vote, and only a few women were involved in political activities. Some of Geisha derived an idea on the newspaper, and some made a political speech in public. They were not just passive puppets, actually, but they looked so, and this appearance was effectively utilized. They were not the only ones used to stir up loyalty during the war efforts. Other popular culture forms were used in a similar way. War songs, war paintings, propaganda films were produced. Traditional theater like kabuki and bunraku presented war theater. Among them, Geisha's dance performance located in a special area. They could portray inconceivable scenes. In order to consider the reason why the dance could represent it, the characteristics of Japanese traditional dance should be discussed. While almost all dance performances are accompanied by music, with a few exceptions, Japanese traditional dance, including geishas, are accompanied by not only music, but also songs. By making lyrics or text express the context, dances are able to represent concrete occurrences. However, unlike dramas and movies, the context could be simplified because dance is shorter, like 10 minutes long, and they do not have to delve its theme. Dance can use words as intended. This gives idea that dance is the art which has less restraint than other arts. Dance can be considered as an art which would comprise the advantage of other art. Descriptive, same to other language arts, which inevitably goes through its subject. Visualizing, same to paintings, which has no words. And harmonious, that music demonstrates, but music doesn't appeal to eyes. Thus, dance occupied special place, and those who became aware of it were authorities at that time. Dance was twisted into a device to lead people along the governmental policy. From 1930s, Japan has been headed toward destruction. Armies were overextended and their military infrastructure was deteriorating. The government hastened to use entertainment to cover the situation and to galvanize the loyalty of the common people. Miyako Odori was one of these popular and powerful entertainment. People were easily deceived and misled by the beautiful appearance of the lively performers, the upbeat tunes and lyrics, and the spectacular stage setting. Further, Miyako Odori set the precedent for other popular entertainment to follow their example, which set the stage for further exploitation by the government under crisis. There were other examples which effectively served the interest of military authorities than just an act of friendship in 1939. War songs were frequently used. National flags were often used in the finale. So this one, thank you.
So somebody has the microphone to you if you have a question. Do you want to call people or you want me to call?
Okay, I can do it. Hi. Hi, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for this really informative and exciting talk. And I have to leave to teach my class actually in about 3 minutes, so I'll be quick. But I was really amazed at the similarities between the Miyako Odori and the Geisha, militarist performances, and of course what I've written on the Takarazuka Review, which was founded in 1913, and also during the 1930s and 1940s performed plays written by playwrights and choreographers employed by the Navy and Army ministries. And I wondered, and the Takarazuka actors also imitated geisha performances as well on stage. It was kind of interesting, and did classical Japanese performances as well as more Euro-American style performances. But one thing that was really interesting is that the only time the Takarazuka Review broke from dreams of classical Japan or another country, someplace outside of Japan, elsewhere in the world, was during the wartime period when they performed Japan in the present, albeit with the kinds of dreams that you mention, the geisha performing. And I wonder if the geisha also were very much presentist in their performances at this time, or if they continued to perform, say, more classical dramas, or if they even, because they were imitating Chinese popular dances and songs, were also engaging in what I call a certain kind of cross-ethnicing, but did they romanticize a classical China as well, or did they invoke Euro-American kinds of performances in creating this spectacle of harmony and global friendship? It was kind of a long-winded question, but yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Thank you very much. Actually, so the Miyako Odori is a special performance for them. So usually geisha dance in classical dance, maybe at the banquet or private parties. But for Miyako Odori, every year the playwrights write new dance, and so Miyako Odori was very much get influenced by the social situation. And before 1930s, they quite picked up some folklore dance from all over Japan. But in this period, suddenly, of course, it's maybe the people of Japan are interested in China continent and other countries, so they take subject from China continent. But so from this, Nisshin Shinko is also, kind of romanticizing the relationship of China and Japan, of course. And also there was another public dance performance called Yasaka Odori, and which has Western music and kind of orchestra pit, and so it's quite different. And that Yasaka Odori was taking in Western, influenced by Western dance a lot. Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your interesting presentation. I enjoyed the film, actually, this footage. I was just wondering, where did you find the footage and who shot it?
Actually, we don't know who shot it, but this is in the possession of the dance master of the Inoue School, and also the Gion organization have 16mm films, and but actually we don't know. I'm not sure who shot this film, but maybe they use colored film, which is very expensive in this period. So, but as for the other example that I show the structure of the theater is having subtitles, and that is kind of like official made, but the colored one is not such like officially show the sense of officialness because shooting is very short and the screen is quite not clear, and so I don't know if the professional took or the maybe wealthy customer of Gion took this film and give it to the dance master. So I'm not sure. But the movement is fast. Yeah, it's a difference of the mechanic of moving. So maybe if you see the films of this period, it's always very fast. You're welcome. Thank you very much for your question.
So I have hi. I love the talk. It was really interesting. I have a kind of two-part question.
Yes.
And the first part is I got the sense that a lot of this kind of, sort of patriotic show of nationalism was very much a top-down thing coming from the military establishment. So I wanted to know, and this is my first question, do you have any sense of what the mechanism was for sending that, kind of mandate or order down to the leadership at the Kaburenjo or whatever it was, or the geisha world? And then the second part of my question is, when you read about authors and artists and even newspapers, there's very much a sense that, despite some pockets of opposition, that they sort of enthusiastically participated in the war kind of fever, or, these war dreams, let's say. I wondered, in the geisha world, do you have any evidence that there was also a kind of bottom-up movement to participate in, a very conspicuous way in the, kind of national, this nationalist kind of movement? And one of the reasons I ask that is because it seems to me that the geisha world in the 20s and 30s was, encountering a lot of competition from other popular arts forms. And so I wondered whether maybe there was especially a kind of interest in sort of standing at the forefront to regain their position as trendsetters or fashion setters. So first question, the top-down mechanism, and second question, do you see any evidence for bottom-up kind of participation?
Okay, thank you very much. It's a really wonderful question. I'm not sure I can answer that. And for the first question, in this period, they have official censorships. And so if you want to make a performance, produce performance, you need to get permission of authorities. So, and to get authority performance permission, so the newspaper report said that the head of the geisha community go to the officials and to see the officials and to apply for the permission, and there was a comment of the officials like you should do something valuable or something like that. And so maybe Japanese people do a sontaku kind of, they think more about the authorities' word, because the authorities know that mechanism. So they don't say that you should be more militaristic, but you have to do something more valuable or more effective, useful. Then the organizers think that we should put some act to encourage people to go war or something like that. And so that is the mechanism of the top down, I guess. And for the bottom up, actually, I interviewed several ex-geisha, but they were just children in this period, so they were not aware of what happened in Japan maybe. And so, but there was a scene that describing Nanjing occupation, and that is the scene that that scene doesn't have dancers, just the setting and the music. And in the setting, the first there was a kind of fire and the battle like setting, and after that from the Nanjing city, which was already finished the battle, and Japan's national flags comes up, and we have the film of that. And so when I showed it to the ex-geisha, and they remembered very well about that scene, and she said that everybody is crying and applauding, and the theater became very overwhelmed, and became many customers became only big group and just applauding, and that scene was very moving, she said. And actually I was very shocked why that scene was very moving. So, but they feel like they feel like so. And so, but for the bottom up, I don't know, but I read many newspapers, but maybe to get the permission, but the performers are quite very sensitive about the authorities' policy, and they go ahead by themselves. I feel like that, but I don't have evidence. I'm sorry. Thank you very much for your question. Yes.
Thank you very much. I found it very interesting that romanticization is happening at the level of relationship. Say, for example, in contemporary American context, Indian mascot depict Native Americans as very naive, very nice, and incompetent. So this kind of romanticization is happening at the level of object. Here, relationship is romanticized. So in part, Japanese are also depicted as very naive because they participate in the relationship. So what do you think why this discrepancy might be happening? So one other example is Paul Gauguin's depiction of women in South Pacific Island, very naive and kind of sexual object. Dehumanization is happening, but evidently very incompetent, so that, well, basically safe. And something like this is happening along with colloquialism and imperial expansion of, in this case, Western European nations, or United States or Japan. So there seems to be some commonality, but here, relationship, why is that?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a very huge question. The relationship, maybe the people wanted to see that good relationship, but I Actually, I cannot believe that people believe in this kind of beautiful relationship because they are, doing invasion, but the newspaper doesn't report the terrific aspect of the war, and so maybe some people believed that the Japanese are welcomed by China, and so maybe people desire make the relationship romanticized. I don't know, but maybe I feel like so now. Thank you very much. Do I answer your question? Yeah. Is okay? It's mysterious, though. Yeah, it's mysterious. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much for speaking. It's always a pleasure to learn more about history. But I was curious, what is the perception of geishas in modern Japan? Like, are they now recognized for having that political agenda, or do people more recognize them now and revere them for being like a part of like quintessential Japanese culture and art?
So now, now
how are they perceived?
Actually, now geisha's world is very aging and becomes sizing down, and so it's no more dominant culture now. But sometimes the TV programs on the geisha's world are still broadcasting, so maybe for some people the geishas are kind of some people are actually in the theater world, the geisha people know that geisha has a special artistic skills, so some geisha are getting award of the dance or something like that. But for the ordinary Japanese people, maybe they don't care much, and it's but maybe if I go to Kyoto and on the street of Gion, there are so many foreign tourists, and it's very difficult to find Japanese people there, and so maybe geisha is more popular in Western country or China, I don't know. So, but anyway, the geisha, today's geishas are very aging, and not so many people are coming in the geisha's world. So because the training is very, strict, and today's young people doesn't like it. So it's the many geisha quarter is now vanishing. So it's I think, honestly, I think they don't care about this kind of culture. So, is it okay with this question, answer? Do you have any other questions? Oh, yes. Sorry, maybe the first.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I really enjoy it. I have a quick question. During the wartime period, if the geisha dance is used to celebrate the so-called greater East Asian co-prosperity, and I saw the video that there's, in addition to this geisha, and some like children, they dress in Chinese. And do you think that the geisha dance, they intentionally incorporate these Chinese art or other countries, their artist or dancing style in this geisha dance to prove or to celebrate this kind of so-called co-prosperity?
So this is the most typical act that celebrating prosperity of the Asia, and yes, because maybe it's in 1939, and in 1937 the Japan started in the Sino-Japanese Japanese war, and so maybe there's many news report, and but after this period, they rather depict the war itself or Japanese army. They concentrate on representing how Japanese army are strong or something like that. So it's evidence of overconfident, and so it's a bit different. So there's not so many acts like celebrating this Asian prosperity, the idea. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for your fantastic presentation. I have 2 or 3 questions. So in this period, the Japanese political and military elite leaders try to use everything at their disposal for the purpose of war mobilization and to enhance support for the war. And it makes sense for them to latch onto this particular art form and to use that for their purpose. And there have been a few questions about how that traditional Japanese art form has been modified for this purpose, whether that it incorporated more of a Chinese style and so on. And that's why I think a lot of people are interested in that question. So I wonder if you can speak to a little bit more about, every other genre of art was pretty much, Jennifer talked about Takarazuka, novels or puppet shows, everything was used to mobilize for the war. I wonder if you can speak a little bit more about how this particular form may be a little bit different compared to other Japanese art genres in terms of how it was used for war mobilization. And second, other countries also use their own sort of traditional art, Germany or Italy, opera and so on. And I wonder if you see any similarities or differences in the way different countries use their traditional art form for the purposes of war mobilization. This is a big question. You can maybe skip this. The third question, I think this is somewhat unique in that it was used not just for domestic mobilization, but also for diplomatic purposes. So they actually went to China, it seems to me, that and to try to convince Chinese that Japanese is a friendly people, and you should also be on board with our purposes of greater co-prosperity sphere and so on. So the key question there is how that was received in China or any other places where geisha went to perform. So if you know somewhat more about that, can you say a little bit more about how this sort of export of Japanese art was received and whether that served the purpose of Japanese leaders?
Okay, thank you for the questions. The first question that, as I told, I think this performance is quite special because this is a dance but with text, so it's quite different from the other art form. Like if you see the war paintings, the paintings depicting always war, battles, and if you see the films, is quite similar to this performance because films are also depicting the ideal situation, like the Japanese people succeed in a new continent or something like that, and it's quite similar, but the dance is more simple and simpler than film, and so dance is more kind of straight. They express the idea, expressing idea more straight in more simple way, and that is very effective, I guess. And so the second question, actually, I don't study any of other countries' traditional art depict cooperating militarism, so I'm sorry I cannot answer. And the third question, so if the geisha or performers go to China continent, the purpose is comforting Japanese soldiers, and I don't think they have contact with the local people in China. So
Chinese kids participate?
No, the Chinese kids are, they were Japanese geishas, just wearing Chinese costumes, so they are Japanese.
Wasn't that to appeal to the Chinese public?
Maybe because this is performed in Kyoto, and they don't go to China or they don't go to other places.
Oh, okay.
But as I said, some people went to Ryukyu or something is to make a performance, to make the intention to make a performance, they get some, get inspired by the local something. So they, they went to China, not China, but the Ryukyu Island to get to know the local dance or to learn local dance and then bring it to the Kyoto's geisha community. But actually, some entertainers also go to China or in front of the battle to comfort the soldiers. And there's many, historical documents that this entertainer went to China and to comfort soldiers there. And there's also evidence that how the soldiers saw the Japanese classical traditional art, traditional theater in China, and they are very much moved or something like that. But it's, I don't have evidence that geisha went to China.
They went to some kind of Great Hall or something?
It's just a setting of the Beijing Forbidden City. Thank you very much. So do you have any other questions? Yes.
It's my understanding that during the occupation, one of the conditions was that at least the kabuki fair was not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if that applied as well. Do you know that this applies well to the geisha performances?
Oh yes, the occupation is American occupation in Japan, right? After the war. I don't think they banned to have geisha's performance because the American soldiers are quite good customer of geisha world, but actually the theater was occupied by some American officials, and so they couldn't use this theater. They have theater in Gion, but they couldn't use the theater, and so there is a from 1943, the last year of the geisha's performance in Kyoto, and so 1939 to 1949 or something, they don't have performance because the theater is, yeah, occupation.
Well, I think that the use of geisha by the American forces,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they weren't, most of the time they weren't geisha.
Mm-hmm.
They were dressed in kimono, and the American soldiers believed they were with geisha.
Oh yeah, if it,
But they
yeah.
weren't really
Mhm.
with geisha, they were really with prostitutes.
Yeah, so yeah, nowadays there's rare, it's rare to wear kimono. So if we someone in kimono, you say it's geisha. But in 1930s, ordinary people are wearing kimono, so it's not the symbol of archaism. Okay, thank you. So is it okay? The time I heard that Michigan time is already over. So now 10 minutes earlier, right?
This will be the
10
last
more
question.
minutes?
Okay. This will be the last.
Oh,
Hi.
thank you. So I'm wondering how in a performance the foreign countries were represented and how Japaneseness, being Japanese, was represented in the performance in relation to other countries also represented in the performance. Because it seems to me that the Japaneseness is, in the performance is, with that performance, the intention of the performance was that to reinforce, to make it more concrete how it's to be Japanese. So to assert that, it is frequently used that Japaneseness is very to make Japaneseness more concrete. It is very useful to represent Japaneseness as superior to others, because Japan, if you try to make it clear what Japan is, you have to contrast with others, not Japanese. So to assert Japaneseness, I think it is important. It is very frequent that to contrast Japaneseness to the others, and make Japanese more superior to others. So, but in your presentation, I saw that in the performance, in the children's performance, the children in a costume of in kimono and Chinese costume were trying is like friends, like equal friends. So this type of friendship presented in the performance seems to me contradict to to try to affirm the Japaneseness. So how the Japaneseness is presented in the performance in relation to foreign countries?
Thank you for the questions. Yes, so you mean the Japaneseness is how Japaneseness expressed in this act, or in Geisha's performance general? Actually, it's dance, and so as I said, that dance is has a text word, and so the dance can describe the context, but it's like very in a simple way. So we don't know who are their parents, or what is the background of why they are dance together, or so it's very difficult to analyze what is the Japaneseness in this like a certain act. But let me see, maybe they are dancing together and they have very friendly relationship. That means it might can express Japanese generosity, because Japan is occupying, invading China, but the children, Japanese children can dance together with Chinese children. Japanese children are very kind to dance with them. In that context, so people are very satisfied with this scene, that all the Japanese children are very kind to the children in that country. And so, do I answer your question? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, it's almost time, so we can thank the audience and, of course, thank our speaker, Professor Mariko Okada, for the fabulous topic and lots to think about. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you very much.